Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schmidtless Live. I'm Kurt Schmidt, president and partner at Foundry, and this show today is meant to educate and inspire leaders like yourself. I'm really excited today to talk to my friend Cale about all things FinTech, all things financial banking technology, all of it wrapped together. Nobody I know knows more about it than this guy, so you've come to the right place if you want to learn a little bit. Before I get started, I just do want to mention that we are hiring at Foundry, so if you are in the tech and design field, check out our careers page because we have a number of openings and we continue to have openings. So go and check it out. Join us. I want to jump in and introduce Cale. Cale, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh man, I'm better now that you're here. So I'm gonna learn so much today. I'm super excited.
Sounds good.
So, Cale, tell me about ClickSWITCH. You founded the company. You're the CEO. What is the work that ClickSWITCH does? What is it? What is it? What problems does it solve?
So we are an enablement tool that allows customers to easily switch their bank account. So we focus on migrating a customer's direct deposits and recurring payments from their old FI over to their new financial institution. So our business model is more B2B to C. So we provide a solution to the financial institution, which in turn offer it to the customer as soon as they opens that new checking account. So started in 2015, we have about 500 financial institutions under contract. We're working with challenger banks to mega banks to community banks. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, and congratulations on all the success. I mean, I always think back, and I know you and I have had this conversation. Is that banking companies? It feels like they didn't realize after the financial crisis that they had suddenly needed to become technology companies.
Mhm.
And so many people like yourself have found opportunities to solve a lot of the problems that they've been unable to, right? And I think, do you find when you first started ClickSwitch and were interacting, were companies like, yes, thank goodness you've got this thing, or were they more like, oh no, nobody's going to want to use that or do that? I mean, what was your experience when you first got it going?
There was some resistance. I think a lot of it was just poking holes, because nobody had a product like ClickSwitch, and we came out of nowhere. And so when you're building it, you're just building it with what you think the end user wants. And so we really relied on that financial institution feedback to help kind of perfect our product. And we're still trying to perfect our product. And we still listen to our customers. We survey our financial institutions. We survey the end users, and we're still trying to perfect it. But I look back to 2015, and a lot of financial institutions still had on-prem servers, and it was really hard to form those integrations. And we come in and we're like, no, we're 100% in the cloud. We're using Azure. And they're like, what's Azure? And
Right.
so now you go into financial institution, everyone's kind of talking that language, and it makes closing the deal a little bit easier. But I think we were a little bit too tech forward in the beginning.
Hmm.
But banks have adjusted. I think over the last couple of years, everybody has a little bit more comfortable with what we're doing.
Yeah, and I can imagine that, also getting involved in this. I mean, understanding what a highly regulated place it is, right? I mean, I've talked to and I had people on the show from anything from big CPGs, 3M, all these different types of things. I mean, they're working in also very highly regulated industries. Was that a big challenge because did the regulations hinder the tech side of things? Because maybe, and again, this is just me thinking out loud, they weren't really designed around these types of solutions and these types of things, right? So you've got protection and all these different things. I mean, was that also a struggle?
It was, and in the very beginning, it was like, all right, you got to kind of stay true to who you are, and understanding if you're selling into a financial institution, you don't want to be a data company right out of the gate, right? You want to get in, make the switch, get out, and move on to the next user. So that was a lot of how we built the original infrastructure of ClickSwitch to make it sellable, so financial institutions could get comfortable with onboarding a product like ClickSwitch. But you go through everything from a SOC 1 to now we're SOC 2 type 2. And just to see how the company has evolved from a compliance and security perspective makes me very proud. We have our own general counsel, we have our
Yep.
own compliance officer, and we're pretty aligned with what we want to do and how we want to position ourselves. But 4 or 5 years ago, we were kind of just shooting, playing darts in the dark here.
Right. Well, that's why I wanted to ask your advice. I mean, if let's say you were running into a small, two-person operation that was starting their own financial technology company these days. I mean, what would be some advice you would give to them? Would it be exactly what you said, is like focus on that consumer experience, or what other advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think it is focus on consumer experience, focus on building out an MVP, a prototype, get that to market, get some sort of pilot out to market, but be able to continue to adjust along the way. Don't get kind of set in your ways where it's just your vision, it's your vision alone. You have to be able to take that feedback from the financial institutions, because at the end of the day, you could build something very spectacular, but if the end user doesn't know you exist or doesn't know how to access you, how they going to get it? So you have to listen to the financial institutions. You got to understand where you want to be integrated into, where do you want to be introduced to the customer when they're going through that flow,
Mm-hmm.
and just be able to take that feedback as it comes in.
Yeah. Well, again, yeah. I mean, it's advice I take to heart, because it's something that when we're working with clients at Foundry, it's a similar thing. Is that we can build anything with technology. I mean, you can
Right.
literally build anything, and but should you, right? Should you build that thing? Should you take the time to do that? So I think that's important to get across to people, is that, be a, while everybody wants to be a Steve Jobs or something, like, you've got to be a good
Right.
listener first, right?
Right. And you got to figure out what's your identity. For so long, we were looked at as we're a direct deposit switching tool, because the financial institutions, they didn't really care as much about auto pays going out of the customer's account. They wanted that direct deposit. So we focused so long on direct deposit, how to automate it, how to make the end user experience better.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're sitting here, we have 500 financial institutions, and we have a new CTO, we have a new head of product, and there's all these really fascinating discussions happening on where do we want to take the company next. But I'm always like, our identity is direct deposit, but what can we add from there? Is it income verification? Is it employment verification? Is
Right.
it a small business line? How can we continually improve our financial institutions that are using our product? But I think a lot of people get caught up on what is their identity, and you got to stay true to it.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, because it's a good segue, Cale, into my next lines of question, is that where you see things going. And I can imagine the benefit of being in those 500 organizations. You can start to see gaps in places pretty quickly, in peripheral sort of areas that you're working in, I'm guessing as well. Do you hear chatter? Do you hear things about what people are focused on in the near term, in the long term, in the banking industry when it comes to their technology? Is there sort of trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, in the challenger bank space, like I mentioned, we're working for the top 6 challengers, and when we implement a challenger, it's very simple. They take our APIs, they have their own tech team, and they can integrate those APIs, and they build out a really good user experience, and it's a very simple process. Even within the mega banks, it's that same simple process where they're just consuming our APIs. When we go down to the community bank and credit union space, let's say they're less than 500 million in assets, they maybe have 5 or 10 branches, they don't have a huge tech team. So how can you create an environment that is easy to onboard with those financial institutions? But it takes a lot more white label approach. I know you're familiar with ClickSWITCH. We have the account switch platform. It's a white label platform,
Yep.
but it requires a lot of manual training. So we're just training frontline staff. When we're working with the challenger banks, we don't train anybody, because we just go directly to the end user.
Right.
So I am seeing more financial institutions looking to kind of beef up their product, their technology side of their house. I'm seeing more hirings as far as innovation officers, more focused around innovation, because I think these community banks and credit unions realize, like, FinTech is here to stay, and we got to figure out ways to partner with these FinTechs as soon as possible, whether it's account opening, whether it's account switching, whether it's digital banking or mobile banking. We're seeing more banks onboard more vendors now than just saying, all right, I'm going to work with my core provider for everything.
Mm-hmm.
They're now having to figure out how to integrate all these different companies, and we're seeing them start to hire some more innovative people to get it done.
Yeah, the challenge I see too is the banks themselves are changing. I mean, Citibank came out, I don't know, a while ago, and said that they thought they were probably going to remove 30% of all banking jobs in the next 10 years. That they were going to, and other people were saying it's probably going to be more like 50. And,
Yeah.
because of this new technology, this automation, these types of things that are allowing consumers to have more control over what they're doing versus having to hand it over to a bank. I mean, you're seeing everything, especially in the mortgage real estate industry as well, is huge opportunities where people are going crazy. I mean, I sold a car on Carvana just a few weeks ago. It was amazing. I just went online. I told them all the things about the car. They gave me a price. They came by, picked it up. It was great. They gave me
Yeah.
a check.
Well, with a lot of financial institutions, you look at just processes that are so paper-based.
Oh
Like
yeah.
you want to get a mortgage, they send you a piece of paper where you're supposed to manually type in your net worth and your salary and all this stuff, and you go down and you email it back to the financial institution. They print it off and they're doing their analysis. Where what FinTechs are doing, they can do these real-time analysis right away. It doesn't require that. So a lot of it is just opportunity of taking these manual processes that you have to staff, and now you can replace it with this automation that FinTechs are building.
Yeah, and again, like the piece that I've seen just in the last few years, because a lot of people thought, well, once I can take a picture of my check and deposit it with my phone, all the tellers are going to lose their jobs. But what I've seen is that their jobs have just changed. They're more customer service focused. They are more technical. They're deeper. They're more like the bankers of old, where they've got more authority and more power. And I feel like in some cases, these jobs that are changing, people are actually becoming more empowered to help the customer right then and there, versus just like you said, like come back in 10 days when your loan is approved or things like that, right?
Yeah, we are facing a time where banks are, there is going to be more switching. There is going to be more, okay, I couldn't use my debit card at this location. There's no fraud. I'm just going to go open up a new checking account. And, financial institutions look at us as a friend, but at the same time, it is going to allow more consumers to get, when they are frustrated, just to, pack up shop and go find a new financial institution to work with. So we always say, our job is to get the customer switched over to you. Your job as the financial institution is you got to retain that customer.
Yeah.
You got to keep them happy, or else it is easy for someone to move. So I think financial institutions do recognize that they open the account, they switch to them. Now, how are they going to retain that? So that's just like the next evolvement of FinTechs is retainment tools for financial institution customers.
Yeah, and I find that when you're working with these organizations, are they do you feel like some are overwhelmed with the amount of work ahead of them, or the amount of people that they're partnering with? Like, how have you seen the banks reacting? I mean, I know you mentioned these larger ones are obviously over the last 5 years, they've hired a lot of engineering support and powerhouses, and the smaller banks they're taking some time. But do you feel like there's people that have really got a handle on it, or do you feel like there's an overwhelming sort of feeling to folks here?
It's a lot better. I think 3-4 years ago it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming for implementations. If an implementation was 30 or 60 days, now we can get it done in 10 or 15 days. I think there's more resources, more knowledge on how to integrate these FinTechs into their platform and get it out the door. But some of these implementations do take a long time, not just speaking from ClickSWITCH's perspective, but you look at, you're switching a core provider, you're switching your digital banking provider, you're switching your mobile banking provider.
Yeah.
That used to be just so overwhelming, where a lot of financial institutions, they may hate their core with like their Fiserv, their FIS, or Jack Henry. They may really hate them, but they're not moving. They just didn't have the bandwidth to up and move and shop providers. I think you're seeing more of that now, where we are seeing financial institutions move their core providers more than ever because they have that technology expertise in-house now to pull it off.
Right. And they're building the infrastructure out, right? They have a place for these things to land when they come in, versus before you were even saying, like, you a lot of times you have to build the landing strip and the plane, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you got to migrate customers from one plane over to the next plane. Well,
I could do this metaphor all day. It's great. Well, in ClickSWITCH's, let's talk about what you've experienced over the last few years. Obviously you and the company has grown a ton over the past few years. Where do you feel like in running a fintech company, where has some of your biggest challenges been? Has it been really in that, how do I understand the consumer better? Has it been in how do I hire? I mean, I'm guessing all these have been opportunities, but if you were giving advice to another startup, person in the fintech world, what's some blind spots that maybe they should be paying attention to as they're growing?
I think your organizational structure for me was the most important thing to actually get ClickSWITCH to that next level. I think it's really difficult to build an organization and then making sure you're bringing in the right people for that organization. We may, 2 years ago, we may have been stuck on a product roadmap for an entire year, and you keep looking at the roadmap and nothing is advancing because there's other people that just want to keep the lights on, and there's other group of people who are fascinated on innovation and want to get going. We are a company that has shifted to, we're focused on innovation, we're focused on our roadmap, we're focused on executing on what's moving forward. Yeah. But for me, it took the right people in the organization to actually get it to the next level. I think there is a big kind of breath of fresh air at ClickSWITCH right now because we have a new CTO, we have a new head of product, we have really skilled engineers that maybe we didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. Now, raising venture money, that does help going out and acquiring, and working with these people. Yeah. For 2 or 3 years when we were bootstrapped and we're just trying to figure out how to make payroll every 2 weeks. Those are one set of challenge, and the next set of challenge is, okay, you raise the money. How are you going to go acquire the talent that this company needs to go to the next level? Right. So the biggest advice I can give, and it's going to sound very cliche, but it is organizational structure. Like, you got to get the right people on your team. You got to get the people who believe in your vision, and you're all on the same team. And I look around the company right now, and from our board to our investors, to our leadership team, from account managers to engineers, we have the team right now to take this company to the next level, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Well, and I think back to that point is that keeping that eye on the future as the founder is really important, and being able to get people on board with the dream, right? Because like you said, right, you hiring those right people, sometimes they're probably going to come from bigger, much larger organizations, and move into a startup where it seems like it's, and ClickSWITCH isn't really a startup anymore in my mind, but there's a trust thing, right? You've got to build with those people, not only to buy into your vision, but to buy into joining the organization as well. And that's a lot of relationship building. So I it's the same thing for us. Like I've experienced the same thing. So.
Well, there's such a difference with big company mentality to entrepreneurial mentality. And, I've learned that along the way where, you hire individuals that work at big companies and they have this big book of business, right? And then how does that transfer over to more of an entrepreneurial based company? So, we look at that when we're hiring people now, just to make sure we have the right people who can understand what our culture is. Our culture is we need to move fast and we need to go. Our culture is that we need to hire, 2 coaches to help these 3 people. Yep. Those 3 people, they're going to learn on the fly, and then they're going to get really good at their job.
Yeah, to your point about the keeping the lights on versus chasing the innovation. I mean, that in those entrepreneurial companies, you need to be able to do both. You in one hand you're keeping the lights on, on the other hand you're designing new lights. And for some people that is a challenge, right? That's why I've seen, and I've talked to some of these people in these very large organizations where they just throw up their hands and they're like, "Yep, we're 5-7 years behind." And I'm like, man, you've got 30,000 employees. Like you should be able to move mountains, But to your point, there's people that have worked there for 20 years and are like, this is how I've always done things and I've been successful. So sit down and shut up and leave me alone. Right. And I think that's why, they love to talk about disruption, these days when, it's not really disruption, right? You've got this thing that happened in 2008 with the financial collapse and then the technology really screaming at the same time. And so you have all these opportunities that while these banks and these other large organizations are reeling from the collapse, a lot of people saw the opportunity with the technology to come in. And that's where you get, the Robin Hoods and Betterments and Venmos and all those different things, right? I mean, even Facebook alone has over like 50 federal licenses for, taking payments and switching, you know what I mean? Like, so it's not even just regulated to the banking groups, right? It's all these other players that have come out of and said, well, we've been able to solve this problem in this vertical. What if we take that same sort of model and apply it to the banking or the financial
Yeah.
vertical, right?
Yeah, and I think you look at even the second quarter of this year, where
Yeah,
you couldn't even walk into your branch to deposit a check. You
right,
know, you look at how much innovation came out of that second quarter of this year to what financial institutions are now looking at from a more digital perspective. So if that ever happens again, they can still move on with business. And I think a lot of people have rebounded nicely, but it is the reliability on FinTechs to help digitize their entire suite of products. So if that does happen again, it's
right,
just the bank moving right along.
right. And to your point, the smaller institutions, the local credit unions and things like that, maybe not as tech savvy and staff, they're really looking to lean on to these sort of partners to help them move into those areas because that's what customers are demanding, right? I say it on the show all the time, like, you know, um, Best Buy's natural competitor isn't necessarily Amazon, but it's also Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and the apps that people are using every single day. Those great user experiences is what I expect from my bank. And if you don't have that great user experience, my level of faith or trust in that organization can go down because it's almost a branding thing at that point, right, Cale?
It is, yeah. And you look at Chime, PayPal, Square, and Venmo. I think, or maybe one more, between 4 or 5 companies that are fintechs or digital banks. They're valued at almost $1 trillion. And if you add the top 10 or 15 assets, financial institutions, they don't even equate to that. So there is the fear of, who's next? Is it a Google? Is it an Amazon? Who's the next company that's going to step forward and start competing with the small market community banks and credit unions? They have to stay ahead of this right now. So they need to start, a year or 2 years ago, needed to start partnering with these fintechs, so they can increase their reach or increase their bandwidth. Just because you move from Minneapolis up to Brainerd because of COVID or whatever, doesn't mean you need to switch your financial institution. You should still be able to have all the products and services you need with that financial institution. I think financial institutions are starting to get that right now, where people are moving out of the city. If they're going somewhere else,
Yeah.
they can still keep their banking relationship. They don't have to move to another bank. But if they do move, I hope the bank is using ClickSWITCH to help that customer.
Well, they should be.
Yeah.
It's the best tool I've seen. So, that's a really good point, Kale, because the I've talked about it. We've seen years worth of innovation happen within months this year. And I always bring it up to people on the show because I want to get their take. But what actually happened there? Did all the bureaucracy didn't just disappear inside these organizations, right? Um,
Mhm.
but what happened? Was it in your mind? Was it just sheer panic? What broke through some of that red tape that you yourself have experienced in the past, over and over again? Like what were you seeing?
I think people are more comfortable with fintechs. I can speak for myself. Where a few years ago, are we a friend or are we a foe? And how are we going to get into this space? And some of these fintechs, maybe they started off as a challenger bank to compete with community banks and credit unions. They realized they built a widget or a tool or an enablement tool that is a better tech stack than some of these community banks are leveraging. So they switched their business model and they start saying, okay, now we're B2B because that B2C model is too difficult. I've seen some of that come out of fintech at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these companies are able to pivot pretty quickly. They are either venture capital based or they're bootstrapped, and they can make those decisions on the fly. So if they're a 10-person company, how do you get this scaled to a 60 or 7-person company as fast as possible? I am seeing more of these. Fintech is a good B2B model. And some people start B2C and then they're able to pivot back over to B2B.
Yeah, that I again, like you said earlier, keeping your keeping your eye on the opportunities as they present. Don't get so stuck in your what your solution is. Keep your ears to the ground, keep listening, keep learning, keep asking questions, stay curious because to your point, out of nowhere, this next big version of your platform or addition to your platform could just land squarely on your lap from one conversation with a VP of financial, who's just like, the biggest problem we have is this, this, and this. And you're like, oh yeah, write that down. Yeah. Right.
You, know,
And
you look at us, and 5 years ago, in order for us to make a switch, we had to build out a database on the back end that was full of direct deposit change request forms. And we would data drop customer information onto those forms, and we would send it to their employer to alert that Kurt has an updated direct deposit information to switch that. Over the last 2 years, we've developed robotic process automation, which allows a customer to just enter their ADP, username and password, submit, and then we update the information. So just to see how far we've come in 5 years, and when you're putting together your business model, you're not thinking about robotic process automation. But as technology advances, you got to be able to advance with that technology so you can continue to automate your solution.
Yeah, and that's the thing in the tech side, because people have been singing about blockchain and AI and all these different things for then been threatening that these things are going to take over the world. But to your point, it's, if you can just create a great experience, you don't need to be the most innovative on the ones and zeros in the back end. You can, if you can streamline that experience, because I say it on the show all the time. My favorite checkout experience is Uber, because there is no checkout. There's no cart. There's no nothing. It's just I want a car and then I'm charged. It's great, know. And they've even talked about Amazon doing predictive, just sending you things and charging you like, we think you'd want this here, because again, back to your point about that automation thing, if you're listening and you're learning a lot while you're going through those switches, for example, from your perspective, you're going to clearly see in the data a lot of opportunities to make that process better, to work closer with the banks, and to find ways to solve additional problems for them. So I think it's great. I think it's fantastic.
I just had this discussion with my CTO, and he just like, you look at it, and Amazon starts by selling books, and now you use Amazon for every purchase that you basically have. Facebook started with college kids, and he's like, I really feel like ClickSWITCH started with direct deposit. We started with going into financial institutions, but it's like, now what's next? You got 500 financial institutions, you got all these clients, you have all these users that are flowing in now. What is next? How can you be more part of somebody's every day through financial interactions?
Yeah, and that's, to your point, the what I feel like the consumer expectation is that, right now, a lot of people have subscription fatigue, right? You've got subscriptions to Netflix, to Apple, to this, to that, to this, that. And so, now Apple is trying to do more of these like rundles, right? Where it's like these larger packages where, you just get all this stuff into one thing. And I see Amazon exploring that sort of thing too. And I could see it in the financial side too, where, you're always trying to get people to upgrade in the bank, right? You're like, well, you should open a checking account and you should do this and you should do a savings account. And that's where I see a lot of opportunity in the future, especially for those fintech companies to come in and be that person that can say, I can take you to that next level because I have the data, I have the inside knowledge, I know what all the other banks are doing, and I can create a solution very quickly. And to your point, having that prototype mentality is so important, because so many other people will spend a year building something and be like, here you go, and people will be like, I don't want to use that.
Yeah. No, it is interesting for us because I think we sit at the center of the banking ecosystem, whether you're talking about community banks, or whether you're talking about a mega bank, or whether you're talking about a challenger bank, because we're working with all of them. So we're able to look at what community banks do really well, what mega banks are doing really well, or what challenger banks are far exceeding projections and numbers. And I look at one challenger bank in particular and how they're acquiring all of these new customers. It's very simple. They allow 2-day early pay. So if you get paid tomorrow, your deposit would have happened yesterday. And they're up like 200,000 new checking accounts a month right now, and they're competing with the biggest of the big banks over something that it looks kind of simplistic, but it's what their customers want.
Right. Yeah. And again, back to that point about understanding what people are doing with that money once they get it, right? I mean, if you know, well, the mortgage comes out on the first, and so, I want that paycheck early before that happens. I want to be able to plan better because
Yeah.
everything comes out on the first, or it comes out on the 15th, or it comes out on the 30th, or whatever. There's tons of
Right.
opportunities there. And I even, at Foundry, I mean, we work with places like US Bank, and it's really interesting to see their innovation team working towards more holistic sort of products, not just financial products, but products that tie in with big financial purchases in your home and these other places, which I think is just fantastic that they're thinking that way, right? And because to your point, what could Amazon do to come in and disrupt that sort of big purchase thing, right? In the financial world, because of their reach, right? And so having organizations like ClickSWITCH, for example, already having that relationship, because you, like you mentioned, the first number of years was you just convincing people that no, this is a legit thing, right? Like you could really use this thing and it will really work, right? And it's building that trust and building that kind of brand with the consumer, right?
Right. And that's, a lot of these fintechs, when they get into it, you got to figure out, A, how can I monetize? And then B, how can I create an ROI to the financial institution?
Right.
And creating that ROI and being able to articulate not just what we're providing on that account switch, but what does the downstream impact look for the end user? How many times more likely are they to get an auto loan with that financial institution now that they have a direct deposit set up, or a mortgage with that FI, or to use their new debit card with that financial institution? So it is all about articulating your value to these financial institutions and get them bought in that way as well.
Mm-hmm.
We could be able to demo something really cool and the entire room would be like, oh, that's really slick. Why do I need it?
Right.
What is the ROI
What's the
involved in this?
impact? Yeah.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
that's something that's become very critical to us moving forward, especially when we're
Sure.
sitting down with a mega bank. If they're going to pay us X amount, what are they going to get in return? And you got to be able to come with them right away.
Yeah. I think the fun piece about it to me, like I sometimes we talk with a lot of startup people. I talk with a lot of startup folks, and one of the things that sometimes stops some of these entrepreneurs is, well, if I design this thing and what if I take it to US Bank and they just steal the idea? What if they just build it themselves? Did you ever have that thought? And how did you come to terms with that sort of thing? Or what would be your advice for someone that was experiencing that?
It's possible, and that is a threat. I think as these financial institutions get bigger, and they're hiring really good engineers, and they can probably pay an engineer more than I can pay an engineer.
Sure.
That is a threat. It is possible, but you do have to tell the story of this. We have 6 years of building this database and this knowledge, and
Mm-hmm.
you can tap into it. And you can, we have financial institutions in all 50 states plus up in Canada that we're building this network full of employers and merchants. And so you really need to articulate again, why do they need you, and
Yep.
why is it going to be impossible for them to build it on their own?
Mm-hmm.
And if they can replicate it, then yeah, you do have a threat. Luckily, all the financial institutions that we work with decide to go with us instead of building their own solution.
Well, and again, it goes back to knowing. I mean, if that's your business, that's different, but that's not their business. Their business is not to build this technology. That's your business. And if you think they want to get into that business, well, good luck to them, because it's not going to. Usually, historically, it doesn't go very well.
Well, and but this, like, a financial institution might build something, but are they going to continue to pour gas on it? Are they going to
Right.
do weekly releases, monthly
Yeah.
releases? Are they going to continue for the next 2 or 3 years to build it out? Or is it a one-time build? And they're like, oh, hope it works, hope our customers use it. When you are relying on these fintechs, it's their sole job is to continue to perfect it. So, that's why we're pushing out weekly releases. That's why there's new functionality every single week that you can continue to get instead of just a one-time build.
Right. Yep. And again, that's telling that good story about the value you get about partnering with you versus, trying to spend millions of dollars trying to do it yourself and then just shuttering it and then hiring somebody to do it for you anyways later, which, I've seen, and I'm not only in tons of other organizations, but in financial institutions. Just in past few years, I've seen them shutter some large initiatives that they spent a lot of money on, and just ended up replacing it with a partner,
Yeah,
and, you know, um, and I think it goes back to like what I said is, know your business, know what you're good at.
exactly. Yep. Stay true to it.
Yeah, and stay true to it. Well, Cale, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I always learn
Yeah.
so much chatting with you, and I appreciate you taking the time. If I want to know more about ClickSWITCH and the work you do there, where is a great place to find out more information?
You can go to clickswitch.com. We are in the midst of building out a new website, so our new website will be out probably December 15th, but you can get all the information you need right now off of clickswitch.com, or you can Google us to see how we're staying relevant in the news through recent press releases, recent partnerships. All of that you can find by just searching ClickSWITCH.
Cool. Yeah, I can't stress enough to people out there, check out the organization. It's also a fast growing one. So if you too are looking for work, I would
Yeah.
keep an eye on their careers page as well, because it's a fantastic group of people. I've been really blessed to know some of the folks over there. So I can't say enough about the great team you've built, Cale, and the work you've done. And I appreciate your friendship and you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on and join me today.
I really appreciate what you do. I mean, this is a great platform for a lot
Thanks.
of founders and entrepreneurs to come in here and tell their story, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Cale. All right, let's close out the show. Thanks everyone for joining. This was an amazing discussion with Cale. If you liked the show, make sure you hit the like and the subscribe and all the stuff down there, because we've got a lot more shows coming up. I'm really excited to talk to a number of other business leaders and tech leaders and design leaders over the next few weeks. So if you enjoyed the show, just take a moment, leave a comment, hit the like button. Much appreciated. We'll see you next time.